Hey everyone, this is Samir, and today I'll be talking about some new things in version 2.6. Especially in this tutorial, I'll be introducing you to the follow spline operator and some new high-level presets. Alright, so let's start right away. And as always, we create an effect scene. That's the first thing we do always, because we need it. Then we go into the presets high level because we want some particles to be generated, which should then in the end follow the spline that we have here, which is named Effex. So I created position-based particles. We also have velocity-based particles. Both of these are new in version 2.6 of Effex, but we just use the position-based particles. We could also as well use the velocity-based particles. Makes no difference here. First thing, I put it into the effects scene, and we can already see that the pipeline viewer now gives us the evaluation order of the effects nodes. But okay, let's just take a look at the parameters of the position-based particles that we have here. Of course, the first thing we need is a source for the particles. So a source mesh in this case, which should be volume, for example, like a sphere or a cube or whatever, anything that has an inside. And I just put it down here and make it invisible in the editor view, and then I drop it here. Alright, so nothing happens. That's because in the emission settings and the duration, we have set start of first sequence at frame 1. So if I would go to the next frames, it would start right away, but we want it to be generated at the very first frame, so frame 0, and we can see it generated 3,730 particles, and I would like the emission to go on for 10 seconds, and if I apply a simulation now, they will fall down due to gravity that we have set here in the effects scene. So it uses a global gravity. If I put it to 0, well, nothing happens with the particles because there's no force acting on them yet. And we want to change that. We want these particles to randomly go to the spline, to the effects spline, and just follow the spline. So later on we can render the particles while they're moving along the spline. Alright, so let's just generate a follow spline operator. In the particles operator subtab, we go here and choose pop follow spline. Pop tells us it's a particle operator, and that's what we need. Alright, so putting it here, and of course we need to assign a target spline, which we have. So I choose the candidate button and use Effex here, and of course we need the target particle group, which is here in the position-based particles preset high-level node. So we choose the candidate button to assign it, and it's called simple particles. I know it because there's nothing else on the scene, so this must be it. What you need to know is that the position-based particles are using a particle group and the passive particle subgroup. So let's just remember, if I generate a new particle group, that we have 4 different particle types. We have passive particles, vorticity particles, liquid particles, and diffuse particles. And the position-based particles, as well as the velocity-based particles here, same thing, they both use the passive subgroup, if you want so. So let's just remember that. So when we assign it here, we choose the first flag here, icon flag, which tells the operator that this simple particles group is indeed having passive particles that we want to modify. That's actually it for the setup, for the initial setup. If I now play a simulation, you can see that the particles are randomly moving to a start position here and start following the spline. That's what we want. What else we can see at first sight is that the particles are moving at different speeds here. That's due to the intermediate points of our text spline, and it is set to adaptive. If you set it to uniform like this, go back and replay, we will see that the particles are moving at a speed much more uniformly, right? So it's all about the intermediate points of the spline. Okay, and we of course also then have settings in our follow spline that tell us how fast the particles should, for example, move to the spline. If I change the acuteness, they will have less acuteness to move to the follow spline. That's why some particles are actually moving elsewhere if they're not hitting the exact start position right away. You can see it here, up here, like this, but they will eventually turn around and move to that spline. So if we had other forces like the gravity, the particles would probably first fall down and then according to acuteness turn around to follow the spline actually, or move to the spline. If I increase it here, and we can see that these particles that were just moving outwards are faster turning around to move to the actual spline. And then they start following the spline. And for this we have other options down here. For example, we can set a different offset, and what I should say is that the offset should be set at the very beginning, because a lot of stuff, a lot of the data is pre-cached, so they're moving, so all that stuff is happening much faster. And as we can see, I've set the offset to 160 centimeter, so the offset to the spline is really high now. And if I, for example, set it to a lower value like 4 and put it back and replay, the particles will move along the spline much tighter, you know. Of course, we have random settings for these, which will all also be applied at the very beginning. So now we can see that they're randomly tight to following the spline. And we can also set like rotations that are done around the spline, step rotation, for example, like this. And we can't see it right now here, but they're kind of rotating around the spline, or while they're moving along the spline. Just maybe lower the speed so we can see that rotation actually. Here you can see it pretty well. They're moving around by 15 degrees each step they're taking along the spline. So a lot of options that you can change or use to modify the result of the following. And well, as you can see, it's also set up pretty fast, just 2 objects now, using a high level preset. Lets you work pretty straightforward. And you can now extend it with lower level options or operators to create other, you know, other effects. And as the position-based particles emitter has also one of the new objects in 2.6, which is the particle geometry. As if we look at the icon here, I just renamed it for the high-level node particle sprites, because that's the initial setup that it generates. We have a sprite polygon here that we are using, and I could now just render this like this, just put it here, and I use all frames. And if I now render this, you can see that sprites are instantly generated for each particle, and we can now render it. So there's not much to set up, and you could just, well, of course, change the sprite object like this and let it generate other objects or other geometry on each particle. I'll just stop the rendering here and just play it so you can see. Well, that's how it's done. So pretty straightforward, and everything is going a little bit faster now in version 2.6. And we have new features that I will introduce in upcoming tutorials in the next few days. So hope this helps, and let's move on to the next one.